Greetings, citizen, and thank you for coming to join me on another foray into the Star Wars Expanded Universe. Today's episode is brought to you by the letter ESC, and ESC is, of course, for the Empire. For the purposes of this episode, the Empire we're talking about is Palpatine's first Galactic Empire, also known as Palpatine's New Order, Galactic Empire, sometimes Imperium, and mostly just as the Empire, formed at the conclusion of the Clone Wars. There have been several empires in galactic history, but an episode trying to cover all of them would probably be a series of its own, so we'll stick to the one that comprised one side in the Galactic Civil War. There's quite a lot of info on this one, so I won't be going on too many deep dives, but feel free to use this as a jumping off point and do that yourself. Without tarrying any further, I'm Rooney, this is Oryx Eric, and this is the Empire. The Old Republic had been a beacon of civilization and stability in the galaxy for more than 25,000 years, when it was brought to a tumultuous end at the conclusion of the galaxy-spanning conflict that came to be known as the Clone Wars. The end of this conflict saw the deaths of Count Dooku, the leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, its general, the cyborg known as Grievous, and the massacre of its entire leading council. In the wake of this victory, the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, in his guise as Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, had manoeuvred himself into a position of absolute power and declared the end of the Galactic Republic and the creation of the First Galactic Empire in 19 BBY. It was a military-heavy, pro-human society where Palpatine's word was law, and many citizens, particularly non-humans and those of lower social status, lived in fear of their imperial overlords. The Empire was responsible for the single largest military build-up in history in its infancy, as it rapidly restored and expanded the remnants of the Grand Army of the Republic, which now formed the basis of its military might. Funds for this build-up were raised by diverting credits from social programs. During this period, the ruling class of Moffs was resurrected and granted to sector governors who oversaw the rule of entire sectors of space, reporting to an Imperial advisor, or in some cases, directly to Darth Vader or the Emperor himself. It was also during this time that the Jedi Purge, the attempted annihilation of any and all survivors of the Jedi Order from Order 66, took place, with the Imperial military forming specialist divisions such as the Purge Troopers and Inquisitorius to track and hunt the Jedi. Many people, particularly those who felt ignored or ill-treated by the Republic or who had suffered during the events of the Clone Wars, wholeheartedly supported Palpatine's New Order and praised the rise of the Empire for its promise of strength and stability and the hope that it would finally put an end to the violence and unrest that had increasingly plagued the galaxy during the twilight of the Republic. At its peak, the Empire claimed much of the known galaxy, millions of star systems and billions more fringe colonies, space stations, shipyards and other far-flung installations. As mentioned, it was notoriously pro-human, but it was also sexist and, at least in some quarters, anti-droid. Non-humans, even those who could pass as a human at casual inspection, and females were routinely and actively overlooked for promotion, often in favour of less suitable, skilled or experienced male officers. The rise to any notable rank in Imperial service as a female or non-human took extreme good fortune or skill. Grand Admiral Thrawn, who was a blue-skinned, red-eyed member of the Chiss species, and Admiral Natasi Darla, who was the first female to reach the rank of Admiral in the Imperial Navy, are prime examples of this. The rumours claim that far from a simple power grab by one of the notoriously self-centered Sith, Palpatine actually established the Empire to protect the core worlds from an extragalactic threat that he had sensed through the Force as early as 27 BBY. It was supposedly an enemy force that he knew the Republic could never hope to face, and so to ensure both his own survival and that of the known galaxy, he engineered the end of the Republic and replaced it with his militant empire, in the hopes of building the military might needed to repel this distant threat. Whether these rumours are true or not is open to debate, although the arrival of the Yuuzhan Vong in 25 ABY and some subtle hints given by Palpatine during his rule about needing to defend from some extragalactic threat, which he used as justification for maintaining and expanding the military after the defeat of the Separatists, would seem to lend credence to them. Governing the sprawling empire required a large and often ruthless government, structured with Palpatine at the top, and layers of underlings beneath him, each assigned to a particular branch of the galactic bureaucracy. Palpatine himself made up the executive branch, delegating to Darth Vader as necessary, and deliberately ensuring there was no clear line of succession, seemingly having decided that either he would rule forever or the Empire would crumble without him. The Imperial Senate comprised the legislature branch, at least until around 0 BBY, when Palpatine disbanded it, delegating all its duties either directly to himself or the local governors and moffs. The Imperial Ruling Council saw to much of the day-to-day running of the Empire, with Palpatine conferring with them only to pass on his edicts or to discuss vital matters. The council largely consisted of sycophants and yes-beings, posing as councillors and advisors, huddling in the Imperial Court to gain their own power and prestige as doled out by the Emperor. Imperial High Command oversaw the military might of the Empire and was overseen directly by Lord Vader. Some whisper, quite quietly I would imagine, that factions within the Imperial High Command were actually more loyal to Vader than his master, seeing him as the true power behind the throne, due to his more public presence, at least in military matters, and his perceived military prowess. The High Command wielded a lot of power within the Empire, given its strong military leanings, and included smaller subdivisions, such as the Grand Admirals and the Joint Chiefs. It also had close links with the next branch, which is the Council of Moffs. The triumvirate of power sharing under the Emperor was completed by this council. They were the planetary, sector and over-sector governors who oversaw the ruling of the Empire in the Emperor's name. They also held military roles as the commanders of all military forces in their designated areas. The Grand Moffs, such as the Death Star's unlamented commander during the Battle of Yavin, Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin, comprised the cabinet, 20 of them, all of whom ruled over an over-sector of space and reported directly to the Emperor. The Imperial Judiciary was as merciless and uncompromising an organisation as would be expected in Palpatine's New Order. Punishments were severe for even minor infractions, and depending on the social class, perceived political leanings, and the whims of the Emperor, who held ultimate sway over imperial justice, could range from execution to imprisonment, either in a traditional penitentiary or a forced labour camp, to exile, like that handed to Dash Rendar's family after the Black Sun engineered shuttle crash on Coruscant earned them Palpatine's ire. See Auric Tazaric Episode 4 for more on that. Political prisoners were often only briefly held by the judiciary before being handed over to one of the most feared and insidious branches of imperial rule, the Imperial Security Bureau. The ISB was the civilian intelligence branch of the Empire, charged with ensuring political loyalty amongst the Empire's populace and officers, law enforcement and internal state security. Effectively a secret police force beholden only to the Emperor or Vader, with almost limitless powers. Even moffs and high-ranking officials could find themselves at the tender mercies of the ISB, and they were known to be ruthless in enforcing their brand of security. Rumours abound of them shooting down shuttles transporting officers or political figures who had incurred their wrath, ensuring that not only was punishment meted out, but in such a way as to be a stark warning to everyone else. Compnor, or the Commission for the Preservation of the New Order, to give it its full name, was an organisation built on an older one from the Republic, Compor, or the Commission for the Protection of the Republic, and it started life as a more ideological group, responsible for civilian youth and cultural groups, and civilian think tanks. Its role was the promotion and perpetuation of the New Order's ideals, which included criticism of the Republic's weaknesses, decadence and corruption, and strong sentiments of human supremacy, alongside good old-fashioned male chauvinism. They were responsible for the propaganda that tried to justify the authoritarian tactics used on the Empire's own citizens, the repealing of anti-slavery laws, and any other injustice perpetuated by the Empire. It also grew to incorporate, and some sources say create, the ISB. They also had their own military wing, the Comp Force, which was intended to give the Emperor totally loyal soldiers separate from the Stormtrooper Corps. They were often placed in other military units to act as security and political officers. Now, outside of this formal structure, though in many cases sat at the top of its chain of command, sat the Sith Order. The dark side Force users, known as Sith Lords, have existed in the galaxy since the very dawn of the Jedi millennia ago, and it was their machinations that brought down the Republic and installed the Empire in its place. Although known to very few within the Imperial bureaucracy, both Darth Vader and Emperor Sheev Palpatine were members of this dark cult, apprentice and master respectively, and have their own secret subdivisions of force-sensitive individuals trained to carry out their will. The most well-known of these groups, though only well-known in hindsight, as at the time it was cloaked in secrecy the ISB could only dream of, is that of the Emperor's Hand, a hand-picked group used by Palpatine to assassinate, intimidate, and otherwise remove problems less suited to being dealt with publicly. It's believed that so secret was this group that the members never knew who else was a part of it, even believing themselves to be the one true Emperor's Hand.
517 to scanner control. 517 to scanner control.
The fall of the Republic was set in motion with the Clone Wars, a galaxy-spanning conflict orchestrated by Darth Sidious, more commonly known as Senator Palpatine. After declaring himself Emperor, he announced that the Republic would be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire, and almost immediately set about doing so, imperializing various parts of the existing Republic infrastructure and branches of government. This largely meant either adding Imperial to the name, or completely dismantling the institution, depending on whether it was deemed useful to the Empire or not. The most egregious example of this was the renaming of the planet Coruscant to Imperial Center and Galactic City to Imperial City, a clear statement that the Republic was gone and the Empire was all. Palpatine launched a purge within 2 weeks of declaring the creation of the Empire, of anyone who held anti-imperial sentiment or who he felt was a threat to his nascent empire, having them arrested, imprisoned, and in most cases executed. Many separatist planets had their assets seized, and the Empire set about pacifying and reclaiming them. With the deactivation of their droid armies at the conclusion of the Clone Wars, many of these planets were left defenseless against the daunting military might of the Empire, a might which only continued to build. This campaign to establish imperial rule across the galaxy was not entirely negative, at least to begin with. The Empire was able to finally defeat the separatists and restored peace and the rule of law to countless systems, driving out the pirates and criminal organisations that had prospered during the upheaval of the Clone Wars and the waning days of the Republic. For many, this brought an end to years of strife, and the Imperial troops were welcomed and lauded as heroes in these troubled sectors. The citizens there were grateful for the chance to get on with their lives in peace. The newly established Comp Nor gave these people a voice, and the Empire effected a facade of reasonability, with gestures to the Outer Rim and similar former separatist territories, such as pardons and early releases of former separatist prisoners. Palpatine quickly identified larger threats to the Empire and set in motion plans to deal with them. Threats such as the Kamasi, a peaceful and compassionate species of pacifists. They were revered throughout the galaxy as mediators and diplomats and had close ties with the Jedi. Knowing that they opposed the Empire for its violent and warmongering ways, and the high likelihood they would use their esteemed position not only to undermine and oppose the Empire, but also aid surviving Jedi, Palpatine arranged for a group of Bothan saboteurs to infiltrate the planet Kamas in 19 BBY and bring down the planetary defense shields, at which point a large fleet of Star Destroyers commenced a planetary bombardment. The attack, and the firestorms which followed in its wake, scoured the planet of life and changed it from a lush, temperate world of jungles, marshes, rainforests and rolling hills to a barren, scorched wasteland. Only around 200 Kamasi are thought to have survived the attack. Many of the Jedi that survived Order 66 were still active in the galaxy, often actively opposing the Empire, and they were deemed such a threat by Palpatine that Darth Vader himself was tasked with tracking and eliminating the survivors. They laid traps for Vader, such as the one on Kessel, orchestrated by Master Sui Choi, but none was successful, and the Dark Lord of the Sith pursued rumours of Jedi across the galaxy, seeking to extinguish their flame forever. By 2 BBY, many people had already realised what is now taken for granted. The Empire was bad. This led to many resistance groups forming on planets across the galaxy, fighting against the oppression of an increasingly authoritarian government. Most notably at this time, a cabal of influential senators, Bail Organa of Alderaan, who had witnessed the slaughter of Jedi younglings during the purging of the Jedi Temple, Garbel Iblis of Corellia, and Mon Mothma of Chandrila, recognised the need to unify against the Empire before it could crush the individual resistance groups, and met in secret on Corellia, eventually creating and signing the Corellian Treaty, an accord which officially created the Alliance to restore the Republic and formally declared war upon the Empire. Thus began the Galactic Civil War. Far from being concerned by this, Palpatine took the opportunity to fully implement what had come to be known as the Tarkin Doctrine, ruling by fear of Force rather than Force itself. This, of course, led to the construction of the Death Star, which was intended as the ultimate summation of the Tarkin Doctrine, essentially a physical warning to dissenters that if they continued to dissent, the Empire would, and now actually could, destroy their planet. Not economically, ecologically, or in some other less definite manner, but physically destroying the whole planet and reducing it to rubble. It also gave Palpatine the excuse to rid the Empire of the Imperial Senate, one of the last vestiges of the Old Republic, finally devolving the power held by that once august body to the local sector and planetary moths, backed by the threat of the Death Star. As a public demonstration of the Empire's new weapon, Grand Moff Tarkin ordered the destruction of Alderaan, home planet of Princess Leia Organa, who was in his custody at the time, in 0 BBY. Shortly after that, thanks to the efforts of the burgeoning Rebel Alliance, in particular the efforts of a rebel agent named Kyle Katarn, in stealing the technical readouts of the Death Star, the huge space station was destroyed during the pivotal Battle of Yavin, a fight which marked the first significant space battle victory for the Rebellion, rid the galaxy of the Death Star, at least for now, and Tarkin, and also proved to the Empire that they were a genuine threat to the New Order, and indeed Palpatine himself. The Rebellion began a campaign of consistent strikes on Imperial targets, inciting the festering anti-Imperial resentments in many systems, growing their strength with every new defection and supporter. They began a propaganda campaign focused around the destruction of Alderaan, a planet known throughout the galaxy for diplomacy and pacifism, which sparked protests on thousands of planets from the core worlds to the Outer Rim. They created and popularized their heroes such as Han Solo and the young Jedi in training Luke Skywalker, and slowly began to weaken the Empire's grip on the galaxy. Even though the Empire usually bested the rebels in military campaigns, as seen on Hoth for instance, they were undermined by the rebels' popularity and promise of freedom in the face of a galaxy crushed beneath the Imperial boot. This came to a head at the Battle of Endor, where Palpatine had laid a trap for both the Rebel Alliance and the fledgling Jedi Luke Skywalker. A group of Bothan spies discovered information revealing that the Empire had begun construction of a second, more powerful Death Star, although Palpatine would later claim he allowed them to find this information. That could just be hyperbole on his part. And that not only was it not yet operational, but Palpatine himself was on board overseeing its construction, perhaps to make sure all the thermal exhaust ports were properly protected this time. They gathered their fleet, calling ships and allies from all across the galaxy for one major pivotal offensive above the forest moon of Endor. Whether he allowed the rebellion to know about the Death Star or not, Palpatine put into motion his own plan, one that would see the rebel fleet destroyed, its leaders killed or captured, and Luke Skywalker turned to the dark side and made into his new apprentice. Unbeknownst to him, his current apprentice, Vader, had also laid plans, intending to turn Luke himself and then destroy Palpatine together, replacing him as ruler of the galaxy, and then presumably finishing off the rebel fleet. In the final reckoning, despite the Death Star 2, as it was prosaically named, being operational and destroying several ships, the MC-80 Star Cruiser Liberty was the first to be destroyed by the super laser in that battle. Palpatine was defeated, Vader was killed, the second Death Star was destroyed, and the Imperial fleet suffered a major loss, both moral and militarily, from which it would never really recover. But how could the huge Imperial fleet gathered at Endor be defeated, even with the loss of Palpatine, Vader and the Death Star? Surely the Imperial war machine should have been able to just roll on to victory, at least in this battle. Now, some attribute it to a loss of morale at learning the Emperor had fallen and seeing both the Death Star and the flagship Executor destroyed. But there are more strange and obscure explanations mentioned by some. According to reports from the battle, the Imperial Fleet Command, and by extension the entire fleet, lost all cohesion when the Emperor was defeated. Rumours persist that Palpatine had been augmenting his fleet, and possibly others throughout the galaxy, via a force method known as Sith battle meditation, effectively holding them together, raising morale and coordination, and making the Imperial armed forces something truly monstrous. And when he was thrown down the reactor shaft by Vader, his battle meditation stopped, throwing those under its influence into disarray and allowing the rebels to defeat the superior force. Another, even more outlandish tale claims that it was all due to one droid bounty hunter, IG-88. This tale claims that the bounty hunter had been planning a droid revolution for some time that would overthrow the galaxy. The last of the line of this model, IG-88A, had built a replica of the Death Star's computer core, and during construction switched them over. When the Imperials installed the core, he transferred his consciousness into it and effectively became the second Death Star. He bided his time, accepting the commands of the personnel aboard the station as if he were the original computer, even correcting their targeting errors of the gunnery crews. He lurked undetected, though it has been suggested that Palpatine felt an unseen presence somewhere on the station. He waited for the battle to be decided before sending the droid uprising signal he'd prepared and destroying the victors. However, even the lurking droid intelligence was unable to have foreseen the desperate flight through the superstructure that ultimately destroyed the Death Star 2 and him along with it. Despite the hammer blow struck by the Alliance at Endor, the Empire was too big an institution to fall overnight. For 15 years, the Empire continued to fight its inevitable downfall, steadily losing planets and systems not just to the rebels, but to rogue Imperial admirals, moffs and governors who saw the collapse of the New Order as a chance to carve their own little empires. Former Imperial admirals Hask and Zinj are prime examples of this, both setting themselves up as warlords over their own sectors of space. Various pretenders to Palpatine's throne attempted to arrest the decline. Grand Vizier Sate Pestage seized the throne immediately after Endor, but held it for just 6 months before being deposed by the ruling council, who were actually acting under the orders of the former head of ISB, Izan Isard. Even the intervention of the legendary Grand Admiral Thrawn was not enough to stop the losses, and in 7 ABY, whilst Izan Isard held the reins, Imperial Center fell to the New Republic in an event that became known as the Liberation of Coruscant. Around this time, about 9 ABY, the Empire had been forced back to an area of space approximately 1/4 of its former territory. With the loss of systems came another, even more debilitating loss, that of recruits. With almost all its former recruiting grounds lost to the New Republic, Imperial forces were no longer receiving Imperial Academy trained replacements, instead having to make do with trainees who were learning on the job. In some particularly dire straits, they were even forced to carry out conscription raids to press gang men into service to keep themselves at least nominally staffed. In 10 ABY, just as all hope seemed lost, and that the New Republic would drive the Empire to extinction, a shadowy new figure rose to the throne and the title of Emperor. This mysterious new leader spent 6 years rebuilding strength and unifying the fragments of the Empire. Many of the warlords that had sprung up in the absence of a true leader fled Imperial-held space in fear for their lives, but the majority of the remaining rank and file remained once it was revealed that this new Emperor was not so new after all, but was in fact Palpatine's evil spirit in possession of a new clone body. The reborn Emperor assembled his Dark Empire, built around a revived Sith regime, and launched a vicious campaign against the unprepared New Republic, Operation Shadow Hand. His goal was to crush his opposition and set up the galaxy as a majocracy of dark side force users, which he would rule over with his chosen cabal of dark side adepts. It seems he had learned his lesson about the Sith rule of two and the apprentice eventually supplanting the master. The new Empire unleashed a new superweapon, the World Devastators, huge machines designed to systematically strip a world of all its resources, striking the double blow of destroying a world and its population, while simultaneously turning them into resources for the Dark Empire to use in creating more World Devastators and fueling the Imperial war machine. During this time, Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker briefly turned to the dark side, realizing he could not defeat this reborn Emperor and his new Empire from the outside, but only from within. When he renounced Darth Sidious and the dark side, he defected back to the New Republic, and used stolen knowledge to use R2-D2 to reprogram the Devastators to target one another at the first Battle of Mon Calamari. Shortly afterwards, at the Battle of Pinnacle Base, the reborn Emperor summoned a Force Storm to destroy the defending New Republic fleet, but the storm was turned back upon him by Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa solo, destroying his flagship Eclipse and destroying the Emperor again. The reforged Empire continued its campaign against the New Republic. And once the Emperor had implanted himself in yet another clone body, he returned to command, leading with his latest superweapon, the Galaxy Gun. Essentially a huge projectile weapon which could fire particle disintegrator warheads anywhere in the galaxy thanks to their ability to travel through hyperspace. It was constructed in orbit around the new Imperial capital of Biss, and its first target was the site of his previous defeat, Pinnacle Moon. The moon was obliterated, wiped from the face of the galaxy. The New Republic sent commando teams to destroy the gun, but they were annihilated by the massed Imperial fleet defending it, and Palpatine used it to destroy several more worlds: Dasucha, Space City, Crinimonen, and Hersey, bringing the New Republic to its knees and forcing most of the galaxy into accepting Imperial rule. The Tarkin doctrine was seemingly alive and well in the Empire once again. Ultimately, it was Imperials that stopped Palpatine this time. A group of officers and politicians led by Sith warrior Karnor Jax sabotaged the Emperor's cloned bodies and his cloning facilities, leaving Palpatine vulnerable in his last remaining clone body. During a skirmish at Onderon, Palpatine was defeated, eventually being shot by Han Solo. The mortally wounded cyborg Jedi Knight Emperor J.S. Brand captured the Emperor's essence as it fled his dead clone body, searching for a new host, and dragged it with him into the netherworld of the Force, finally removing Darth Sidious from this plane of existence. With the reborn Emperor finally killed, the New Republic were able to set the Star Dreadnought Eclipse II on a collision course with the Galaxy Gun, destroying both of them. But not before a damaged and malfunctioning Galaxy Gun fired at the new capital world of Biss, destroying it and killing the inhabitants, as well as the Imperial fleet in orbit. In the wake of this disaster, the Empire once again found itself adrift with no leader, no capital world, reeling from a huge defeat at the hands of the New Republic. The Empire had effectively ceased to be a power in the universe. The former warlords ran back to their little empires, and the Imperial survivors fled the core worlds. Karnor Jax attempted to hold together the remains of the Empire, but he lacked the necessary skills and power to succeed, and many fleet commanders refused to follow him, breaking away to go it alone. There were a succession of leaders of Jax's small Crimson Empire, but the ruling council was being targeted by Yuuzhan Vong agent Nom Anor to speed the final dissolution of the Empire and remove a potential obstacle to the Vong's approaching invasion of the galaxy. He helped to place Councillor Xandel Caravas on the throne, where he disbanded the ruling council and declared himself Emperor. The New Republic was taking no chances and attacked him in his power base on Ord Cantrell, and in a battle he was killed by another former ruler of the Crimson Empire, Kir Kanos. After his death, the little remaining Imperial authority collapsed, and it finally fragmented. The Empire was no more. Now, the Imperial reunification of 12 ABY would see the forming of the Imperial Remnant. But despite holding on to the old ways of the Empire, they were very much a new beast, eventually signing a peace treaty with the New Republic in 19 ABY and becoming an ally of the New Republic's successor, the Galactic Alliance, during the Yuuzhan Vong and Swarm Wars. For 32 years, the Empire darkened the galaxy, slaughtering, enslaving, and dominating as it saw fit. Was it the culmination of one Sith's hunger for power, an attempt to bring peace to the galaxy, or a weapon intended to smash an extragalactic threat? I think it's probably somewhere between the three. In the real world, everyone knows the Empire from Star Wars. George Lucas did the very savvy thing of making them look a little bit like World War II Germans, but sound like the British, neatly wrapping up the best qualities of Hollywood villains into one white armoured package. They are the quintessential big bad, frequently emulated and referenced but never bettered. Who among us can forget that first glimpse of the Imperial Star Destroyer, it was the Imperial 1-class Devastator, by the way, Vader's flagship at the time, chasing the Tantive 4 over Tatooine at the start of A New Hope, and the faceless white stormtroopers chasing the rebels around the Death Star. Lucas has stated that the Empire was based on the Galactic Empire in Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, though a far more aggressive version of Asimov's benign government. He also took a lot of obvious inspiration from Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany, right down to Palpatine's claim of an empire that would last 10,000 years, echoing Hitler's promise of a 1,000-year Reich. The Empire is a huge subject, and to be honest, there are a lot of areas I would have loved to have dived deeper into. But in the interest of brevity, I could only touch on them very briefly, or in some cases skim over them entirely. If you want to know more about the Empire, then I can recommend Tales from the Empire, which is a compilation of short stories set around the time of the original trilogy, and of course the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and The Last Command. It is an amazing series, and every Star Wars fan should read them at least once. So there you go, a very brief tour through the history of the Empire. Thank you all very much for joining me, and if you enjoyed it, maybe tell a friend or reach out and let me know. I am always happy to chat Star Wars. Until next time, don't let the Minox catch you sleeping.